in the blues and cotton candy pink. Tipsy-turvy and tilt world, deep into the carnival. She sings, got lost in this whirlwind of a world.
Ryan Redebaugh is an actor, musician, composer, and producer. He is a composer for film, TV, games, and commercial media. Most notably, he wrote the score for the award-winning rebranding film campaign for the UK Scout Association, Skills for Life, preparing both young boys and girls with the skills they need to succeed in life. He also scored the award-winning feature documentary, What's Love Got to Do with It?, featuring thought-provoking leaders including author and minister Michael Bernard Beckwith and psychologist Dan Siegel. He has scored numerous independent narrative films that have won awards in the festival circuit, ranging from heartfelt dramas including Then by Millennia Pictures to intense thrillers like Nights of Being Loose, directed by Nikolai Shatinkin. Ryan's music has been licensed for television and can be heard airing in over 30 series, including Discovery's Shark Week, Comedy Central's Daily Show, as well as various programming for HBO, History Channel, Biography, MTV, and Netflix. In addition to being a composer, Redebaugh is an experienced singer-songwriter and record producer with 3 original LP credits to his name in the pop rock genre. He is currently working on a feature documentary with a university about domestic violence. He attends Columbia College Chicago's graduate MFA program in scoring for the screen, recently ranked as the 3rd best scoring program worldwide by The Hollywood Reporter. Before attending Columbia, he received his BFA in drama at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. He brings to his work an enthusiasm for music, storytelling, creativity, and collaboration. You can find his portfolio at his website, ryanredebaugh.com. You can download some of his music or stream it on Bandcamp or Spotify. Catch some of his videos on YouTube. You can find him on Facebook. You can find him at Ryan Redebaugh Music and on Instagram at Ryan Redebaugh. Hello again, Ryan Redebaugh.
Hello, Isaac.
You and I met in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, I believe while you were still living there. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to say it was 2011, I think. I was home for a year or so, and I think we connected there.
Were you already in New York and then you came back for a brief period, or were you yet to go to New York?
I had been in New York, I think at that point, I want to say, for my college experience. So I did NYU theater, and so I had been in New York at that point at least, I want to say 2 or 3 years by that point, maybe 4. Yeah.
Now, you went to New York specifically to go to school. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. I started at Penn State for a year or so, and then I had always enjoyed music and acting, but I think at that point I hadn't really considered those as potential majors in a college setting, and my freshman year, I had taken an acting class and really fell in love with the craft and the scene study and the collaboration. And at that point, I was like, well, I'd really like to explore this further. And I had a teacher there who was like, you should go to New York for like a summer and take some acting training at a studio. And just kind of put more fuel to the fire and fell more in love with it. And at that point, I eventually came to decide I wanted to go to school for acting, and I wanted to go the studios that I was training at were affiliated with NYU, so I knew I wanted to pursue that path. So that's what brought me to New York.
And while you were there, I believe after interviewing you the first time around, I caught either your reel or a clip that you had shared, but you had some featured background roles. There was one in particular where you were a bartender, I believe, right?
Yeah, that would have been Pan Am. So I after school, I think when I met you, I came home for a year. I wrote a lot of music, and I think too, I was also just needing to get away from New York City for a good minute, and I just really enjoyed. Our town is pretty rural, suburban kind of area. I just enjoyed that year of kind of peace and quiet. I feel like that ever since I've been living in cities, I'm in Chicago now. I feel like that year was one of the most peaceful years I ever had. So I look back on it fondly. I was able to tap in, write a lot of new song material during that year as well. And then when I decided to go back to New York, I was deciding what to do next. I was still in my early 20s at that point. So I was kind of sussing out like life direction and all that. I decided, well, I have all these friends in New York. I have these musician friends, actor friends. I have these communities that I really enjoy and I'm still in touch with. And so I think after a year at home, I was really ready to just plug back in and go back to New York, and ended up staying in the city for at least another 10 years or so, all in all 13. Just moved out from last summer. But yeah, once I got back into New York, I plugged into background work. So doing a lot of extra work on various film and TV sets of all types, and getting a sense of different types of productions. And a lot of those experiences where you are one of many, but some of those became very cool experiences where you're either selected to be a little more featured in a scene, or you actually get to do some acting with the leads on the day. So I cherish that experience, and I'm happy it had an end mark, because after a while, very early morning hours, late night hours, set conditions, not always being ideal. It was nice to kind of step away from that, but I very much cherished those experiences, and had a blast being around some of these productions.
So I want to ask, I'm not from Williamsport, which is where we met. I spent 8 years there, which is a lot of time. What was that transition like for you, going from there, the peace and quiet, but a place that could help you build your burgeoning art skills, then coming to a major city, a worldwide major city, now going to Chicago, which is an incredibly artistic town, less populated than New York, but still very big city. What's that like for you? Can you still identify with rural Pennsylvania, with small town USA, after being in cities for so long?
Absolutely. I think it's two sides of one coin. I think the life experiences are on paper two very wildly different day-to-day experiences, but I think I relate to both sides, and I feel like both having lived both versions has really kind of helped me become who I definitely think it's influenced like who I am, in both of those modes, and artistically too. I think, yeah, they're two very, very different experiences, but I think in either one, you can tap into your artistic kind of community, whether that's big or small, and even in your own work, be really vibrant as an artist in both of those. I do think in a smaller kind of setting where there is not a lot of noise pollution, or the thing about the cities, there's so much energy kind of happening nonstop, and it can be really difficult at times to kind of unplug from that energy, and to always feel like you need to be producing or creating something or being productive, versus in a quieter suburban neighborhood. I feel like you tap in more quickly to that artistic flow and that creative flow, versus in a city environment. I can totally see needing to kind of find some quiet within yourself to maybe have a more productive writing session or whatever it is you're doing. So I see those kind of being the two differences, but definitely, I think being a vibrant artist in both, as an individual and also in a collective community, both are, very, very possible in both settings.
Most definitely. And when you first went to New York, and it was that time that I started to pay attention to you. I'm trying to think how I even became aware of you when I was in Williamsport, to put you on the Meet the Artist Monday show. But I became aware of you. You went to New York. I saw, again, like the reel or clip of you in some shows. So my understanding was, oh, you're becoming an actor. What's funny is that I was just about to become an actor, and I didn't even know it at the time. But then at some point I saw that, there's a lot of music happening with this dude. So many of us are are in multiple art forms, or we have multiple facets to ourselves as artists.
Hmm.
Was that just all happening at the same time for you while you were in New York? Like, okay, there's opportunity for acting and there's opportunity for music and there's this and that, or was it that you really found your footing more with music over time, and so you decided to give that more of your energy? Please talk about that.
Sure. For the longest time, I just really, I love both. And I, I think by nature, creative driven individuals, and I think everyone's really creative, uh, whatever outlet that takes. But I think by nature, people who engage in the arts, I think, excel at multiple areas. And very often they become known maybe for that one thing, but secretly or not so secretly, they're also doing all these other things. So for me, I just always, from being a kid into early adulthood and into adulthood now, I just really resonated with both, and I love both kind of arenas. I think over time, and I think for the longest time in New York, while I was in New York, I was trying to do both and equally split my focus between these two things, and that became pretty challenging. I think over the longer run, and I always felt like, man, like I never wanted to just focus on one thing or concentrate on just one thing because I love both so much. But I think over time I started to recognize, you know what, like I'd really love to kind of just channel my focus more and more into one thing. I think too, naturally, music kind of like if an opportunity came along to play a part in a film, like an indie film or something, like I would, if available, I'd love to do that. And I think it'd be so much fun still to do those kind of things. But I think over time, music kind of won out for me. Like my my passion and energy behind any kind of musical project, it just filled me with so much joy, and acting did as well. But I always felt with acting, like the second you really committed to a character, like a lot of those stakes are pretty high in a dramatic storytelling setting, and those, if you're really committing as an actor, those experiences, they kind of, I had difficulty keeping some level of space between myself as a actor and the characters that I would portray, whether that was a project or even just in a classroom setting. Whereas music, the time always kind of sped by, like I lost track of time. And I was just so engaged with it, and I still am. And I think over the years I just recognized this is really where my passion lies. Like I'd still love to see the acting thing through. It was kind of playing through my head, but I really started to resonate more and more with any kind of musical creativity, be it songwriting, and then eventually I started getting into scoring, and that's kind of where I'm channeling my focus now. But I love the collaboration too that went with it. I loved making music with friends, and that's kind of how it started for me. Music has always been kind of self-taught for me, and it was a very individual thing for a while. But growing up, I was always in bands of some sort, and those experiences, making music with good friends, is like, to me, the height of what music is. And then to share that in a live setting or in a recorded form, it's a process that I would never tire of. And I love exploring different kind of musical kind of genres too, and getting creative, and finding a sense of voice, but also allowing yourself to kind of stretch and challenge yourself in new ways and explore different sides of a musical voice. So I think for these days, like I'm definitely, acting is still in the periphery, but I've kind of honed in on music. I've put all my chips in on music, and I'm ever since I kind of made that decision, I've been loving every minute of it. And for me, the turning point was deciding to go to Columbia College Chicago, do a master's program in scoring, and really, make a firm commitment to this path. And ever since I've been focused on that, I just feel like, yeah, like this is the right path for me, and this is the best outlet for me, creatively.
How did you become aware of Michael Bernard Beckwith, and what is it that you like about him?
So I think I first came across him in the documentary The Secret that came out like long time ago. So I had remembered seeing him from that, but then I became he kind of crossed my path. Like I've never met the gentleman, but he crossed my path again. I was scoring a documentary. It was really I was just starting to get into scoring work, and through vis-a-vis through songwriting. I had a buddy who was aware of my songwriting work, and he really kind of pushed me into like the scoring arena, encouraging me to really explore that. And we collaborated on a couple kind of corporate videos. And so I put in for a documentary as a feature independent documentary, What's Love Got to Do with It? And Michael was one of the interviewees in this piece. And so I obviously when you, like scoring a piece, you're spending a lot of time, with the footage, and it's like you can recite, especially in a documentary, everyone's a talking head essentially. So it's like there's a lot of dialogue. Michael was one of maybe 10 or so, maybe more, folks who were interviewed for this documentary, really just kind of covering all facets of love, love between, parents and children, romantic love, spiritual kind of side of things as well. So Michael commented on a lot of those kind of different areas throughout the film, and I really enjoyed like his segments. Like you say, just really an engaged person, very enthused, lots of enthusiasm, and just like it translates, on camera, just like that zest for life, and really meaning what you say. And I always valued his, especially in the film, his sound bites, essentially, like his quotes, just very connected to life. And so anytime like his segments would come around, I was really determined, like, I gotta like do justice with the music. I gotta like, I guess in a way he made my work easier on that project, because like the segments were so inspired already, and the music could really just kind of sit underneath that to further inspire. I almost felt like during those moments, almost being like if he were speaking to a congregation, like being on the side and playing the soft synths in the background to like really get that inspirational vibe kind of going. So yeah, he circled back around through that project, and that just went live a couple months ago for Valentine's Day. So it's cool to rewatch that, and having a couple years in between working on it and seeing it again, to kind of hear some of those thoughts and ideas after the fact.
So when you look back at your musical timeline, you got involved in bands in Williamsport, musical projects, and now you're scoring for films. You're in this whole other place. So how would you describe Ryan Redebaugh, the musician back then, as opposed to Ryan Redebaugh, the musician now? And how has that changed you?
That's a great question. I've been thinking about this actually pretty recently, because I see, so I don't know how I think I was just naturally like drawn to music. I think as a kid, I remember like if there's a piano in a store, and if I was with my mom shopping as a 5-year-old, I'd run off and go mess around on the keyboard, not knowing what I was doing. And then I just really got into playing instruments, and piano and guitar and drums growing up. And then I really got into songwriters and seeing live music. I remember I mostly played sports growing up, and I remember in sports there's a winner and a loser, and if you're on defense, the best you can do is stop the big play from happening. The worst you can do is let the touchdown score, and you feel like, oh man. And then I remember going to see a concert, like a rock show, and thinking, oh man, like you can't do no wrong. There's no wrong you can do here. Like you play songs, you entertain people, you kind of share music, and it's celebrated. And I was like, that is so cool. So I got into songwriting and playing with bands and recording music. So I'd say that kind of side of things was my true beginnings in music. Once I started getting into writing music as a songwriter and recording and performing that, and then since, as you mentioned, have kind of gotten into the scoring side of things. So I see that transition. Essentially, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's something I've been wrestling with for a while, as far as like what is the artistic voice as a songwriter? How is that different than as a composer from visual media? Are they different? What does one sound like versus the other? Can they relate at all? And then underneath that, you start to recognize, oh, wait a minute, like you're still the same creative energy, creating music and writing music that's going to one or the other, but it's that same kind of artistic voice. So that's something I've currently been, really working on, both finding a voice, like what is my voice as a musician or writer, and not necessarily splitting those two apart, but letting that same artistic instinct kind of take shape and form and influence what I do in one or the other, and not making it a dichotomy, like a split kind of thing, but allowing both to kind of come together in a way. And I think too, over time, your voice grows. I think whether it's music or anything else, I think your creative and artistic expression evolves over time. We are not the same person we were since last we spoke, several years ago. It's like the evolution of an individual and the expression of that individual over time. And I think, it's a fun ride, because you listen back to something you did years ago, and it may not even resonate anymore, because you're a completely different person and artist. So it's really fun to see that arc kind of take shape. And I think along the way, just like something I'm trying to do is, just trust in that arc and allow it to kind of take shape and evolve. Encourage yourself to take chances creatively and explore new terrain that you otherwise might not. Something I'm doing right now, I just finished a semester here, so I'm starting to plug back into some of the songwriting work. And it's so easy to get back into old habits of like, oh, well, like this is what I've done before with song, and writing towards a certain kind of idea, almost like in acting, where it's like you can play the idea of a scene and really kind of miss those moment to moment things that really make a scene come to life. So I see that in music too. So I'm challenging myself to really stay open and allowing the unexpected kind of moments to happen, and to start to follow some of those threads and kind of go for the ride in that way. It's almost like surfing. It's kind of like you're riding the wave of creative output, and as the waves cresting, you can't like judge the wave and like try to steer the wave. Like you gotta go with it. So
Los Angeles is next for you?
that's the tentative plan for the time being. And of course, if opportunity arises elsewhere, definitely gonna again remain open to considering if the wave wants to kind of go that way. So, but yeah, LA is the temporary plan. Would like to get kind of rooted out there and get connected with the film music world out there, and also video games.
With all those different art forms and your advancing skills at all of them, that really kind of allows you to take a lot of different types of jobs. Have you had survival gigs since following your art? Do you still have a survival gig, or are you able to get by on just the art now?
So yeah, New York was a lot of survival gigs, like everything under the sun. Like you, I also my first job was tour guide at Radio City Music Hall, and I did that for a good year and a half. I want to say. Um, so and then a lot of work on set, doing the extra work, doing the stand-in work. Just pouring hours into set, like 14-hour days on set. Um, Brand ambassador, working different events, working like New York Fashion Week, working, seeing cruise ships like set sail, ushering people on, working, big fancy parties, catering for like a minute. Um, and I was staying engaged in a lot of those different types of odds and ends for much of my time in New York, like either between projects or even just on the side, doing a lot of that work. And I think I got so burnt out doing it, for the amount of time that I was doing it. It was like there's no semblance of a regular week. Every week was different. Even if I was just doing set work, it was like every day was a different set, a different crew and production, and different hours, and it was nuts. Like I got to know all the neighborhoods in the city like really well, because like these locations were all over the place. I drove like a car for work for a month before an accident that kind of lost me that job. So it's just all types of adventures, and I think all that kind of fueled me recognizing my energy had been going to all these different things, and then creatively to like going to music, going to auditions, acting projects, putting things on tape all the time for casting agents. And I got really frazzled and fried doing that. And I was like, I just feel like I started to feel like I wasn't really super in control of my path at that point. And I was just kind of trying to do everything, trying to do way too much, and starting to recognize I really got to sit down and start to channel my focus and really decide what is it that I really want to go after and kind of spend my time doing. So I think all those years of doing those odds and ends really kind of, led me to that desire and realization of like, oh man, like if I just keep on like this, it's gonna be another 5 years, and I'm still trying to do all these things. So that's kind of, what kind of led me in this direction. And then now in Chicago, my grad program here is pretty full time, so I'm pretty focused on that for the time being, and really just not letting too much of anything kind of interfere with that focus. So I'm technically a full-time student at the moment, and happy to do that for the couple years here.
Until recently, of course, Uber and Lyft driving were the predominant survival gig for all actors in New York. There was a study about it.
I thought about it too for like a minute, like a hot minute. I was like, you know what, maybe, but no.
Ryan, I absolutely loathed this city until I stopped driving in it. Once I started taking transit, it was like, this is like actor heaven. I absolutely loved it. Every time I've been through Chicago has been in a car, unless it's like a layover on a flight. Nowhere are there more aggressive drivers than Chicago.
This is so true. It's complete opposite, and it was a brutal awakening moving here to recognize that being the case, because as you said in New York, it's like the pedestrian rules the road, and like, you're as a driver, you're constantly looking out for bikes and pedestrians and what the other person is doing essentially, and trying to not hit anyone. Because as you said, like super gutsy. But in Chicago, it's the complete opposite. Like the driver rules the road. If the pedestrian has the right of way, they really don't. It's still the driver has the right of way. So that's just I don't know. I don't know why it's like that. it's maddeningly frustrating at times, but it's just like, you gotta, so like 13 years living in New York, like I've had to like reverse that psychology and like really just not even engage with some of these drivers because they're just so aggressive, and it's insane.
Yeah. LA is kind of, as I'm sure we'll find, it's kind of a hybrid. Pedestrians have the right of way,
Mm.
and you certainly will see them trying, like exercising it, trying to do that to the degree that you're used to in New York. But at the same time, buses they have to stay on a schedule, and there's everything in SoCal is so spread out that they really, really do need to stay on this schedule. And they will like look you in the eye while they're maybe going to run you down. Like, yes, you have the right of way, but I'm not stopping, dude. There's that going on.
Right.
But
Yeah, I'm not super. I've been to LA just a couple different times, but I haven't really spent a whole lot of time there to really have a sense of what the scene is like, and especially driving and whatnot. I just remember a lot of traffic, and you know being in a car a lot essentially is the name of the game.
absolutely. Yep. Yeah, it's different speed too. Like LA is certainly busier than where I'm from, which is San Diego. Everything. The name of the game in San Diego is vacation, slow down.
Mhm.
What are you doing? And whereas you go to LA and you realize, oh, this is why I'm in San Diego, because it's nice here. It's relaxing, and it's a smaller pool of everything too. So like in LA, where you might be in a band and you're fighting with contemporaries for the same gig, in San Diego, it's much more supportive because no one's truly making their living off their music in San Diego,
Mhm.
whereas in LA you can. And so yeah, it'll be an interesting experience for you having Pennsylvania, rural experience, massive city life of New York and East Coast, Chicago, kind of in the middle. LA is going to be a real different game for you for sure, but probably a fun adventure for you.
Yeah, I was born in San Diego, but as a kid, your experience of a place is through a kid's point of view. But I feel like by nature, having kind of lived my first like 9 or 10 years out there, I've always secretly wanted to like go back.
Hmm.
And I even like wrote a song about it, like Goes to the Coast of California, of like wanting to go back to California. And it's funny to like fast forward now, and it's like actually that's kind of the direction I've set for my life. But yeah, I'm looking forward to like the California chapter, and it's been fun to experience so many different types of settings. But any like trip to California, it's always such a pleasant time of like, I love the idea that the weather's beautiful year long. I love, the coastline and all that. So I'm looking forward to it.
With the stuff that you're doing now, focusing primarily on scoring, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
You're not doing a lot of, and you're going to school, so you don't have a lot of time to write your own personal music probably right now, correct?
For the most part, yes. During like semester breaks, I kind of turn to that outlet again. So coming out of this spring semester, this summer, I'm planning to keep on with that. We shared a record last summer, which was kind of like the culmination of a few years of a project. So that was a big kind of release year. But I've already during these breaks been writing like new material. So I'm deciding if I want to do another like kind of album or do like an EP kind of thing. And I'm also starting even before like coronavirus and the lockdown, like I was starting to like produce a lot of this at home in my home studio here versus tracking with an engineer in a different location. So yeah, this summer I'm planning to kind of dive more into the songwriting thing because that's just something I love it so much, and like I'm always excited by the potential of like a new song and seeing that song through.
What's stewing? What stories and emotions are you needing to share?
Yeah, that's it's funny because every time around, I tend to see. I still don't see some music as like a single. I still see a collection, batch of songs as being a cohesive album. So every time around, thinking about like writing another album project, it's always like you want to kind of like we were saying earlier. It's like you want to let things evolve and become new and kind of unique and different um, when kind of sharing your voice. So that's still something I'm kind of sussing out. Like what is the direction of this? But it's funny. A lot of my songwriting too doesn't necessarily like it. It has truth in it, absolutely for me personally, and like I share myself in these songs. But I also feel like, especially on the last project, got really into storytelling songs. So like telling stories about people or situations that I might not have experienced personally, but like just the very act of like crafting that narrative in a song form is really exciting to me. So I think I'd like to follow that kind of trend. But yeah, I'm also too considering like what do you do with these times, coronavirus? Like what is the sentiment? Like is it of value to put something into a song form that is really relevant now, but like if you fast forward, hopefully, this time next year things are starting to look a little different again and a little more normal. Like would that same song really resonate, years down the road? So I'm kind of, to go back to the wave, like I'm in the wave writing process. Like I'm still figuring out essentially, what kind of wants to happen next, with the writing. And I tend to sit down at a keyboard or a guitar and just kind of just start improvising and seeing what happens from there. So yeah, that's a deeper dive for this summer. But I'm really excited to see kind of what comes of it.
So you frequently do not have a concept or like a hook or a riff in mind when you sit down. Usually it's just let's just see what happens.
A lot of times I like to kind of pursue it that way, but that tends to be less effective, like workflow wise. Anytime coming at it with a strong idea in mind and intention, and especially if you have like a lyrical kind of structure in place already, putting that to music tends to be a lot quicker and more efficient. But then it's the kind of juggling act of like trying to make one thing fit another thing, versus even if it takes me longer to fully realize a song, I really like to just let the music kind of happen, and then through that process and letting that music kind of come forth, like start to recognize, oh, like what does this song want to be about? Like, and maybe some sounds become words, and then it's like, oh, okay, like let's kind of go down this road with this, and then to away from the music, sit down and start to really like get concrete about what the lyrics are. On that note too, like I definitely think too, as artists, like you get so kind of focused in on your work that you forget to zoom out every once in a while. And so I think too, for the folks you bring on, myself included, like it is really neat as an artist to be like, oh yeah, like it's really kind of fun and interesting, like what I've been up to all these hours, and like to kind of zoom out and have that perspective of like, oh yeah, it's pretty neat, and to have an opportunity to share that story and that process. And I think it's community building, and I think for both listener and interviewee, it's a very nice way to connect and hear what's going on in someone else's life. So,
Yeah.
So thanks for having me on, Isaac. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Isaac.